and you're now with the Forerunner Chronicles. All right, everybody, so at first, I thought it was a figment of my imagination until I saw this BBC News article entitled, Coffee Addiction. Do people consume too much caffeine? And then I realized it's not a figment of my imagination. There is an increasing number of caffeinated products that are hitting the shelves every year for consumer consumption, whether it be energy drinks or 5-hour energy supplements, no-dose pills, chocolate bars, coffees, lattes, you name it, caffeine is finding its way into almost everything. But why are people so caught up with caffeine? Because when you use the word addiction, that's a word that we usually think of when we think about alcohol or tobacco or narcotics, illegal narcotics. But caffeine? Can caffeine actually cause an addiction? And are people really that enamored with caffeinated products? Well, to get to the bottom of this, I just bypassed BBC, and being the inquisitive individual that I am, I decided to hit the streets and talk with a few individuals on this issue. Take a look.
Coffee. Mountain Dew.
Just straight up coffee.
Straight up coffee?
Yeah. I like a double shot of espresso from Starbucks.
Coffee?
My favorite caffeinated beverage is Diet Dr. Pepper.
I guess because it's got the most caffeine in it.
Been diabetic for a long time, and the flavor of it is different from anything else.
Makes me happy.
What do you think?
Might be 3.
I probably drink 6 a day. So
I think in 12 hours I drank a 2-liter.
that would be tough.
No.
No.
Well, yeah, if I want a headache.
And there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, why is it that when we as a society discuss substances like alcohol or tobacco or even illegal narcotics for that matter, we always make it a point within the public square to warn individuals about the addictive nature of those substances and the unhealthful conditions that can be produced within the human body as a result of their ingestion. However, in the case of caffeine, in the case of that foreign substance, we hear little to no discussion of this nature within the public square. Now, is that just a coincidence, or is that by design? Because from speaking with multitudes of individuals on this whole issue of caffeine, one thing is clear to me. And that is that there are millions of people that feel as though they cannot be productive, normal human beings without their daily dose of caffeine. And that's problematic. So to get to the bottom of this problem and so much more, I decided to sit down with my good friend, brother in Christ, and licensed healthcare professional, Ron Meinhardt. And the result was the production of this special Forerunner Chronicles documentary entitled Caffeinated. You don't have to wait to see it because it's coming up right now. God bless.
The Food and Drug Administration is investigating reports of 5 deaths after people drank Monster energy drinks. The report claims people had bad reactions to the drink, which contains 240 milligrams of caffeine.
I get caffeine withdrawals. I have to say I get headaches if I don't have my Coke.
More today about the 14-year-old girl whose parents are suing the Monster energy drink company. They claim she died after she drank 2 cans of Monster over a 24-hour period. According to the lawsuit, the girl had already been suffering from a disorder that weakened her blood vessels. An autopsy found that, quote, caffeine toxicity impaired her heart's ability to pump blood.
Yeah, each can is about 24 ounces, Shep, and they contain about 240 milligrams of caffeine. That's about equal to 7 cans of Coca-Cola, but it's less than 1 16-ounce cup of coffee, say from Starbucks.
I'm addicted to Starbucks drinks.
In the early 1900s, the United States faced a crippling problem, and that was the fact that many individuals, many citizens, were addicted to narcotics. In fact, if you wanted some cocaine, all you had to do is go get your favorite open happiness beverage, Coca-Cola. Many people were opening happiness, but it was leading to a disability and a disabling effect that was destroying their lives. Now, if you wanted some heroin, all you had to do is go to your local pharmacy and get some heroin cough drops. Said it soothes the throat, makes you feel better, makes you wake up on the bright side every morning. But we know heroin today makes people steal from their grandmothers, makes people rob from their children. Is it all worth it today? Well, back then, fortunately, the United States government said it's not worth it anymore. In 1914, the Harrison Narcotic Act eliminated the use of these narcotic substances in the common formulas of daily living, such as the colas and the cough syrups and the lozenges and many of these other over-the-counter remedies. Now, that was good and that was fine. But what happened to these industries when they were faced with this ban and they had been used to making multitudes of profits off of these enslaved addicts? What did they do? Did they just close up shop? I'll submit to you something even more deadly and dangerous. They chose to replace narcotics with caffeine. Caffeine was a little known substance at that time. Although many people had reported its ill effects, it seemed to be the perfect replacement for these companies. Why did they choose caffeine? Perhaps they knew something that the American public did not know. Caffeine is a white crystalline substance that has been isolated from a plant source. What did the plant use it for? Well, do you realize caffeine is a natural insecticide? Bugs come and land on the leaves that are containing the caffeine substance. They eat of the leaves, and you know what happens? They start acting erratic and shaking and moving around. They lose their natural camouflage. And as a result, birds and other animals come and eat them and devour them. But why are 90% of Americans today consuming a natural plant insecticide? Let's talk a little bit about caffeine, about the addictive qualities of this white crystalline substance that's found in so many products today. Did you realize that the leaders of these industries that are producing these chemical-laden products have one thing to say about their product, and that is it doesn't really cause a full-blown addiction. They will submit scientific research trying to validate this claim. But you know what? It is well documented that there are many physical side effects of caffeine. How does it happen? Well, for one thing, caffeine blocks the effects of a hormone in the body. This hormone is called adenosine. Adenosine is kind of like a braking hormone. It kind of slows down responses. It inhibits certain responses. It also keeps the arteries open so that the blood can flow normally through the system. What happens when we have caffeine? Well, did you realize in your brain your blood flow is reduced by an average of 27%. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd like to have all the blood in my brain that I can. I need it. Our brains need blood, they need oxygen, they need glucose to be able to function properly. What happens is people that are consuming caffeine are dwarfing the capacities of their brain. This goes on for a certain amount of time, but you know what happens to the hormone, the adenosine? It keeps building up in the body. It didn't go away. It didn't go away. In fact, adenosine is a natural byproduct of just work, of just thinking. As long as you stay awake, you're going to be building up adenosine in the body. So what happens all of a sudden when the caffeine starts to wear off? Well, the adenosine is in higher levels, and all of a sudden, your vessels open wide, and it's like a floodgate opens on your brain. You get a pounding headache. This is how it works. This is why people need to constantly take caffeine or even caffeine-containing drugs to get rid of their headaches. I'll submit to you the best way is to stop the caffeine. Get rid of the caffeine. You might go through some physical withdrawal symptoms, but it's worth it in the end. Trust me. I did it myself. Going through this process of addiction with caffeine and finally getting off, I realized my life is much better as a result. But there are many people today that are hooked not only on the physical side effects of caffeine, but they're hooked on something much more subtle and much more degrading and disabling than even physical side effects can be. Now, the physical side effects of caffeine can extend up to a certain point, and that is physical death. Did you realize if you had one drop of liquid caffeine penetrate your skin, you would succumb to sudden death as a result? It's deadly. It's a deadly toxic poison. So why are we continuing to put it into our bodies? Well, I'll submit to you it partially has to do with the physical side effects. One of them is headaches. One of them is the seemingly beneficial effects of being able to stay up later at night instead of going to sleep. Well, did you realize that adenosine levels build up in the body as a result of work? Did you realize that 90% of healing and restoration takes place while we're sleeping? Work, rest. Work, rest. It's a cycle. It's a normal cycle. But what caffeine does is it tricks the body into thinking it does not need to rest. It tricks the brain into thinking we don't have to listen to all these hormones, to all these adenosine molecules. We can stay awake. Well, here are some of the reasons I can think of. Reasons why I even chose to use it myself in days past. One of the biggest reasons is so we can stay up late at night watching our favorite television show. Or maybe we're working a night shift and we didn't get enough sleep during the day, and so we decide, well, we'll just take some caffeine. We'll just drink some coffee when we get to work and we'll be fine. Are we really fine though? What are some other reasons? Well, some people take caffeine just so they can study longer during the night, so they can pass that test they're going to take in the morning. But does this really make sense? Well, first of all, one of the reasons why this is totally ludicrous is the fact that caffeine reduces blood flow to the brain by 27%. You are dwarfing and crippling the mental faculties of your brain while you're carrying out this seemingly benevolent process of cramming your brain with information so that you can pass your test. I did it before. It didn't always work correctly for me though. The better thing is to go to sleep and to get up early. That's the best alternative. But you know what? Most people who are spending late nights studying are doing more damage than they think to their brains. Did you realize during the sleep process, we go through a process of sleep known as REM sleep. REM sleep is the rapid eye movement, where we close our eyes are moving back and forth within the eyelids. This is the process whereby we dream also, and whereby it's hypothesized that we store information and we associate information together. Now imagine if you just have a whole lot of thoughts and facts and figures in your brain with no association and no way to use them practically. This is how most people are studying today. That's why when they're coming out of colleges, They don't know what to do with the information that used to be in their brain, but is no longer there because their brain has been crippled and disabled through this process of study all night, sleep maybe during the day, party all night, sleep maybe a little bit during the day, and supplementing those periods of tiredness with caffeine, the beverage of choice, the substance of choice, to give you a little pep during the day when you need it. Aside from these physical symptoms of caffeine, and aside from the alertness producing effects of caffeine, could there be even more reasons why so many people are using caffeine in the United States and in most of the world today? I'll submit to you that there are many other reasons. One of these main reasons is the fact that caffeine is more addictive than most people believe. Did you realize that one of the properties of caffeine is to increase the addictive propensities of other potentially addictive substances in the brain? Let's talk a little bit about the addictive process to fully understand this. In the brain, there's a small portion known as the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens has been well studied for its role in pleasure-related addictions, such as addictions resulting from cocaine use or amphetamine use or narcotic use. But you know what? Addictions from this area arise from a normal process that goes on in this nucleus accumbens. Anytime you have a pleasurable sensation, whether it be from something as innocent as reading a book that you enjoy, as going for a walk, as participating in your favorite hobby, you gain a certain amount of pleasure in this center. Now, pleasure is generated by a hormone known as dopamine. So dopamine secreted in the shell of the nucleus accumbens is a normal pleasure response. Now let's think about this. Do you know some substances that can create an abnormal pleasure response? What about cocaine? What about heroin? What about other narcotics? All of these can produce a substantial amount, a tremendous amount of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. What does that translate into? Ecstasy in pleasure. Now, this is not such a good thing because it's totally different from those simple, harmless pleasures of daily life. It's an addictive pleasure. In fact, it causes the nucleus accumbens to secrete so much dopamine that it bypasses the threshold of what would be normal and goes into a process creating an addiction to this pleasure. So all of a sudden, everything else that you used to do seems a lot less pleasurable. And you become focused on those things that only meet your pleasure needs, such as the addictive products. Now that being said, how does caffeine play into all this? Well, there have been numerous studies that have shown that caffeine by itself, when injected into a rat's brain that has been strapped down to some kind of incubator and poked and prodded with needles, does not elicit a pleasure response. Now think about this first of all. If you were strapped down to an incubator and poked and prodded with needles, your brain might even be opened up and being infused with caffeine at this time. Would it be pleasurable to you? Of course not. It doesn't make sense. The beverage industry will say, look at this research over here. It says that our products don't cause this type of addiction. But let's take a look at the research that is a little bit more pleasurable to the rats when they were injected with this caffeine. In fact, one study that was published a few years ago looked at male rats that were infused with caffeine, but then were allowed to actually not be strapped to an incubator and poked and prodded, but they were allowed to return to their cages. What did they do? Well, they jumped on their wheels and they went round and round and round. They ran around and around and around, chasing each other. They did the pleasurable things that rats do. Now, what happened during this time? It's very interesting. What happened was they actually had enhanced pleasure from these normal activities. Why is that? How did it happen? Well, the researchers concluded that because of caffeine's effect on adenosine, which is kind of a braking hormone, a slowing hormone or neurotransmitter, pleasurable responses increase in intensity during caffeine use. What does that mean? When's the last time you had a nice beverage, nice warm, creamy, smooth, chocolatey beverage, laden with sugar and fat, whipped cream and sprinkles on top with a cherry plop right down there in the center? Oh, that's pleasing, isn't it? It's pleasing. In fact, that by itself, scientifically speaking, with that high amount of sucrose and the high amount of fat, can produce an addiction if you consume enough of it. But what happens when you put in the caffeine? Well, it takes the brakes off the pleasure response, and all of a sudden what you're holding in your hand is equivalent to a drug of addiction. You don't become addicted so much to the caffeine, physiologically maybe, but your mind wants the product, wants the pleasure. What does that mean? Well, it sells plenty of products today. It sells plenty of Coca-Colas with their nice, fizzily, bubbly texture and their smooth vanilla extracts and all types of pleasing scents and aromas that are bubbling and fizzing, and they're actually pressurized into your system. That's why carbonation works so effectively, because it's pressurized. So all of a sudden, caffeine is injected into your system. Flavors are injected into your olfactory bulb that has a sensory effect for smell and even for taste. And you become incensed with the desire to get more and more of this because the pleasure braking system is shut down and the dopamine or the pleasure rises higher and higher past the threshold of normal pleasure, entering into the addictive pleasure responses. What does this mean? It means many people today are consuming beverages or consuming products that they are addicted to. Not so much the caffeine. You don't have a lot of people with this effect that are going out and taking the no doses or the Vibrants, but you have millions of people that will forego their lunch, that will forego their arrival on time at work to sit in a drive-thru at Starbucks to get their addictive mocha latte frappuccino delight with a cherry on top. Can you think of products or environments that are pleasurable and that also are serving caffeine at the same time? Can you think of other places besides maybe Starbucks or your favorite coffee house that you're getting this environment of pleasure? What about the movies? How many people will reach for that 36-ounce Coca-Cola and large bucket of buttery popcorn while they're experiencing the pleasures of the screen? Do you realize what this is doing? It's bringing you back and it's enslaving you to that system. It's time to break free. It's your choice today.
Ladies and gentlemen, God has left for each and every one of us a multitude of wise instruction within the Holy Scriptures. And if we were to simply, by faith, follow the counsel that God has given us, He could keep us from a world of hurt and pain in this lifetime. The Bible tells us in Psalms 103 and verse 5, "Who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles." The Word of God is letting us know that God has created for the benefit of humanity not only substances that are good to the taste, that are satisfying to the taste bud, but they also renew our strength. They renew our youth like that of the eagles. In other words, these substances have an invigorating effect upon us physically, thereby as well ministering to our mental and spiritual well-being. In the case of caffeine, we are not looking at an agent that has a renewing effect. On the contrary, caffeine steals from your future vitality and it cripples the normal neurological process. Therefore, caffeine is disqualified as an agent that God would condone to be placed within these bodies, which are the living temples of His Spirit, purchased by the blood of Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary. Ladies and gentlemen, God must be the only thing that we're addicted to in this life. The Bible tells us in Job chapter 23 and verse 12, "Neither have I gone back from the commandment of His lips, for I have esteemed the words of His mouth more than my necessary food." God has placed within each one of us the need to eat to live, but we should place His word above even that which is necessary to sustain life. How much more should God's word be preeminent to something that we don't even need to exist? I want you to think about that the next time the devil tries to tempt you to partake in your addiction. As always, this is the Forerunner, and whether you like it or not, the truth is the truth.